before we get started, make sure you subscribe to our channel. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you click on the bell notification so that you get notified of all of our upcoming videos. All right, so hi there. This is Paul Kim with Real Estate Life 360, and I am here. We're live with Brittany with Next Generation. And I was just telling Brittany that I'm just trying out this new interface. It's called Be Live, and I found it to be very simple to use to go live. And so we had a little bit of technical issues at the beginning for Brittany to come on, but I thought it would be a good way to bring on businesses and investors and agents, so that way we could not only promote their business but also to get to know their business as well. All right, so why don't we get started? Brittany is with Next Generation, so can you just give me a little background as to your background and also what Next Generation does?
Sure. Hey everybody, sorry I'm so far away. We're testing out this interface with a camera in our conference room, so hopefully you can see and hear me all right. So as Paul mentioned, I'm the Director of Marketing and Sales with Next Generation. Primarily, our company's role is to provide financial services for self-directed retirement accounts. So that's typically accounts like IRAs and 401ks that allow you to invest in alternative assets. So that's outside of the stock market, things that are not publicly traded and which a lot of people don't realize can be held in retirement accounts with many of the same tax benefits as the other plans that you might have. So my background is primarily in marketing and sales. I've worked for a number of different industries over the years, in healthcare, finance as well. I have over 10 years of experience, and I have over 2.5 years of experience, with the company here. We have a full sales and marketing team that provides customer support and help with education around the topic, since it's new for a lot of people, as well as account setup as well. We've been in business as a company for about 15 years. We're a women-owned business and we're located here in New Jersey. So that's my background. I just earned my self-directed IRA professional certification here. Through some studies and some courses. So that's kind of the latest.
Okay, sounds good. So even though I've met you and I've known you for the past 2.5 years that you've been with Next Generation, I still have some questions for myself. So the audience that we have are mostly real estate investors and agents. And so I wanted to ask you, what exactly is a self-directed IRA? I know that most people that work with a company and or even for myself, self-employed, there's simple IRA and IRAs that the company set up. What exactly is a self-directed IRA?
Good question. So a self-directed IRA is, from a tax perspective, they work similar to other IRAs or retirement plans that you might be familiar with, but the biggest difference is the allowable investments in those plans. So when you think about a traditional regular IRA or account that you might have with like Fidelity or Schwab or some of the larger firms, you're typically restricted to investing in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, and you can only invest in the items that are approved on their platform. So with the self-directed IRA, your options suddenly open up to, beyond stocks and bonds, being able to hold non-publicly traded assets, and then also being able to choose your own investments and then make all the decisions around how you want to manage those investments. So the idea behind that is that there are a couple benefits to the self-directed IRA as a tool, right? So one of them is diversification. So being in the stock market is good, and lucky for us, it's doing pretty well right now. So that's good too. Mm-hmm. But one of the downfalls to being fully exposed to the market is volatility. And unfortunately, that's just something that we don't have control over. So when the market's good, everything's great. When the market dips, we're not so happy. And we don't have a lot of control over those peaks and valleys. So the idea is that some people like to, outside of being invested in the market, which is a good thing, further diversify into holding other types of investments that aren't on the market. So they're not necessarily exposed to that same level of volatility. So that's one of the biggest differences with a self-directed IRA.
Okay.
The other difference is the ability to have a little bit more control, as I kind of alluded to earlier, over your investments. So rather than being kind of stuck to picking from a menu of options, you're able to go out and seek your own investments. It might be something that you feel strongly about, or you might know somebody that has a company you want to invest in. So you can make those decisions, and then you can also determine a purchase price for those investments. You can negotiate those things yourself, so you're not limited to kind of what that value is on the market. And then obviously the other big thing is the tax advantage, right? So if you were to make, for example, real estate investments with your personal funds or your personal cash, that's great, but anything you earn on those investments is typically considered taxable income, right? So you would be responsible for paying taxes on those earnings as you're recognizing those earnings. The difference with holding those types of investments in an IRA, which would have to be a self-directed IRA, is that whatever you earn would be put directly back into your retirement plan. So that gives you the option to defer those taxes on your earnings. Or if you have a Roth IRA that's self-directed, all your earnings would actually be tax-free. So you could take all of the gains that you made on those investments. When you reach the age at which you can pull them out from your retirement account, you can take them tax-free. So it's really the ability to put them in a tax-protected vehicle, and then to either defer those taxes over time, or to put them in a vehicle that allows them to be tax-free. So hopefully that helps distinguish the difference a little bit. The last thing I would say is a common misconception is that a self-directed IRA is just like a type of IRA, and that there's just like one type of self-directed IRA. But within that category, you can have a traditional tax-deferred self-directed IRA. You can have a Roth. Paul, as you said, if you're self-employed, you can have a SEP IRA that you can self-direct. You can have a simple, if you have your own business and you have a 401k plan for your business, you could also potentially set that up to be self-directed. So there are a lot of different options even within the category of self-direction. It's just a matter of getting the education to understand the differences and then what you think would be the best fit for you.
Okay, so so in your experience, since you've been with Next Generation and just, gaining knowledge, what do you think, what would you say are the typical, majority of people that set up these self-directed IRAs? Is it real estate? Is it, I don't know, what other alternative investments are there, have you seen, that you would say are the top three?
Yeah, good question too. So I would say real estate's number one.
Okay.
It probably makes up when we look at the asset classes that we hold here in self-directed accounts, it probably accounts for over 60%, maybe close to 70%. And then even within that category of real estate, there are several different investments that you can make, right? So you can hold property directly, whether you fix and flip, or you wholesale, or you buy and hold. You can do private equity investments in real estate funds, private REITs. You can do lending to real estate companies or investors. So all those things I would consider to fall in like the category of real estate. But there's also, I would say the second most common is generally private equity. When we look at investing in like any startup company, in a hedge fund, in any sort of like LLC that's privately held, there's a lot of that happening too, whether it's for real estate investment purposes or it's any company, right? So we've seen people invest in like medical device startups because, healthcare is a big area of growth, and other tech startup companies that are private. Private stock, like even pre-IPO stock. So we've seen clients that invest in like Spotify before it went public. People were able to buy that stock privately, and then when it went public, they were able to hold it and then transfer it back to their brokerage account so they could trade it. But they had the advantage of getting in pre-IPO by holding it in the retirement account and then keeping it tax advantage. And then I would say the third area is just lending in general. So when we talk about like private lending, IRAs have the ability to lend money to individuals or to entities, depending on who they are, but pretty much for any reason. So it could be for, let's say, a real estate investor just needs a construction loan or they need gap funding for a project or something, and then they know somebody with a self-directed IRA that's willing to lend them that funding, they can borrow that from the IRA and then they pay it back to the IRA with interest or just according to whatever those terms would be. So the borrower benefits by having the funding, and then the lender, which is the IRA, benefits because it gets paid back interest at whatever percentage that's going to be, is basically the rate of return that IRA earns.
Oh, gotcha. So you actually answered some of the questions that I was going to ask about. Can a self-directed IRA invest in like fix and flip? And you said that you could also do rentals, I guess. And
Yes.
I was looking online, and you also mentioned like syndications and I guess REITs and things like that. And so I wasn't even aware that you can do that. But let's say, for example, a fix and flip. That's you're talking um, in relationship to the actual investor that's going in there, buying a property, fixing it up, and then selling the property, right?
Right.
And so that, I guess, that then when you get, I guess, just trying to think, even though if it's his own property, he can use his money, self-directed IRA, or is there limitations or restrictions against that? Do you understand my question?
Yes, I think I do. Yeah, and that's a great question, because there are certain rules and restrictions that the IRS has set forth.
Right.
That while you can invest in real estate with an IRA, there are certain stipulations you have to follow.
Okay.
One of the things the IRS looks at is who are you doing the investment with? So who's on the other end of that transaction? What's the relationship to you as the owner of the IRA? And also who's benefiting ultimately from the IRA's investment, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes people try to use the IRA as kind of a tool to, on the side, get them some more money for something they're doing personally. But the IRS does have specific rules in place to try to prevent that. So the idea when you're using an IRA to invest, it's really that the benefit should go to the IRA and it should be more of a passive long-term investment. So an example of what I mean by the restrictions is that the IRS has a list of what they call disqualified people. And they basically say that if you're using your self-directed IRA to do an investment transaction, you can't do a transaction with a disqualified person, on the other end of that. So that's not allowed. Examples of disqualified persons would be you personally, and I'll provide examples so that this makes a little bit more sense, but you personally, and then any ascendants, descendants, or their spouses. So when you look at like your family relations, if you look in a lineal fashion, like your spouse, parents, and then children, grandparents, that sort of direction, those relationships, they don't allow you to directly do a transaction. So an example of doing a direct transaction would be, let's say you already have a property, right, that you own, and you're doing fix and flip, and you run short on funds and you need more funding. A lot of people will ask, can I use my self-directed IRA and just loan myself or loan my LLC the funding for that? Unfortunately, the answer to that is you cannot, because you're considered a disqualified person from your IRA. So you wouldn't be able to directly borrow funds from your IRA. In that case, most of the time when people are using self-directed IRAs, if they're doing a real estate investment, they're buying a new property that they didn't previously own, right? So you're not like taking a property you already own and transferring it into the IRA, but you're looking for like a new investment opportunity where your IRA is going to initially fund that purchase and then take ownership of that. So that'd be a case where like you find a new rental property, for example, that you want to purchase. You decide you want to do this investment with the IRA. The IRA goes in, the purchase contract would be in the name of the IRA. Any deposit gets put down by the IRA. The property would be deeded to the name of the IRA, and all that is done for tax purposes to protect the tax advantage status of the retirement account, and also make sure that what you're earning is getting you the tax deferred earnings and not going to your personal account where you would have normally been taxed. So it's because of the tax benefit, there's a very clear distinction between allocating what your IRA is putting into an investment and what your IRA is getting back, separate from your personal funds. Now, without getting into too much detail,
Okay.
it doesn't mean that you can't partner with disqualified people. So
That was my next question, actually.
was it? Oh, okay. All right, good. So yeah, it doesn't mean that you can't partner. There are specific rules there if you're partnering as well, but let's say you wanted to purchase a property and you had maybe just for simplicity's sake, like half the funds in your IRA, then half personally, and combined that would give you the ability to do the investment.
Right,
then sure,
right.
you can go in personally as a 50% owner, and then your IRA can go in as another 50% owner, as long as you do that from the very beginning. So you wouldn't be able to like personally buy it and then try to have your IRA buy out half. You've got to fund it as two investors from the beginning,
Gotcha.
IRA and then person,
Gotcha,
right?
gotcha.
And then
Okay.
if the IRA funds half the purchase of the property, then the IRA earns back half the income associated with that. And
Gotcha.
the IRA's 50% would be the tax advantage portion, and then your personal 50% would be taxable to you. So as long as you're allocating them per the ownership percentages, you can certainly do that. We see that a lot too.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, that was very helpful.
Sure.
I have some questions, additional questions. So let's say, going back to what you said about, so you can take money from your current, let's say if you currently have an IRA or a Roth IRA, you can roll them over into a self-directed IRA. Is that correct? Is that true?
Yeah,
You can do
so
that.
there are two, well, probably more than two, but there are two main ways that you can fund a self-directed IRA. So the first step would be opening the account.
Right.
You just fill out an application to do that. And then the next question we would always ask is, where are your funds coming from, right? Because we want to know what type of funding transaction we need to help guide you through to get the funds over to the new account. And we also want to know, are those funds eligible to be moved into the IRA? So the easiest situation, more straightforward, is if you already have an IRA somewhere. So let's say you have an IRA at Fidelity and you're invested in stocks, bonds, equities, whatever, public securities, and you say, I have 100,000 in this IRA. I want to use 50,000 for a real estate investment. How can I get that into a self-directed account? So that, when you're moving funds from one IRA to another IRA, is considered a transfer, which is basically movement of the funds from one trustee to another trustee. So the first trustee holding the current account would be Fidelity. The trustee receiving the funds would be Next Generation, for example.
Gotcha.
And that transfer is non-reportable and non-taxable because you're simply moving funds between IRAs. They're already in IRAs, so it's not really that big of a deal to move them.
Okay.
So it would just be like a simple wire from Fidelity to Next Generation into your account. That process can take anywhere from like a few days to maybe like a week or two. The one thing we can't control on that side is the other institutions' processing times and how quickly they let go of your funds. Sometimes they need to take their time, as you can imagine. But transfer is definitely a common way to get that accomplished. What's a little trickier, or I should say involves a little bit more due diligence, is if you have like an old employer plan. And oftentimes this is when people start looking at self-directed IRAs. So say you worked for corporate America for 5-10 years or whatever, and you had a 401k plan with that company, and then you left and you decided to maybe start your own business, or you became an agent and now you're on a 1099, whatever it might be, and you have this old 401k that's just sitting there not really doing anything now because you're not able to contribute to it, your employer's not contributing because you don't work there anymore. So a lot of people say, I want to take this 401k that's sitting and do something and move it into an IRA. In that case, 9 times out of 10, what you can do is you can roll over those funds from your old plan into an IRA. And that's called a rollover because the funds are coming from one type of account and then they're going into a different type of account. So the process is slightly different than what I said before with the transfer. Right. You can certainly also do that. And that would be, again, it would be the institution that holds your 401k, or if it's also, a 403b, a 457, if you were in the military, TSP, all those types of plans would give you the option typically to roll over. So that institution would just send the funds over to your new account.
Okay.
Where it gets tricky is where you have a 401k, but you're still employed with the company. That's usually the situation where they're not going to let you move those funds. However, there are some exceptions, and it kind of depends on the plan, because every plan is written a little bit differently. So if you have what's called an active 401k and you're still working for the company, your best bet is to call the company that's administering your plan and just ask them, can I roll this into an IRA? Is it eligible?
Oh,
And those
gotcha.
are things that we can help guide, people through the process on. If we're having an initial discussion, we're going to ask those questions like, what type of accounts do you have to work with?
Mhm.
And we can help them find out if they're able to move them over.
All right, cool. On another, so this is a simple, not a simple, but another question is, let's say, and this is actually two-part question, because, because when you open up an IRA and you're starting, let's say somebody that just graduated and started on an IRA, they'll start putting their minimum amount, and, and so I would assume that this is not, well, and correct me if I'm wrong, like a self-directed IRA, I would assume that it's more for people that have money that can transfer it and then invest, rather than somebody that's just coming on board and just starting to invest. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because, like
Yeah,
a traditional IRA, you start and you can invest in stocks for as little as like, $100 or whatever.
right,
You know what I'm
exactly.
saying?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I would say. I
yeah,
would say that's probably a fair assumption. Given that if you're just getting started, the only way that if you don't have any other retirement accounts, the only way to start building up a value in those accounts is by making personal contributions, meaning that you're taking some of the money you're earning at work and or from your savings account and you're depositing it into an IRA. However,
yeah.
while that's a great thing and the ability to do that's good because sometimes you can deduct those contributions on your taxes, the IRS only lets you contribute so much every year. So there are limits to that. You can't just like dump thousands and thousands of dollars.
Right.
So if you have a traditional or a Roth IRA, typically for 2020, the annual contribution limit is $6,000 per year. If you're over the age of 50, they let you put in an additional $1,000, so you would be able to put in $7,000 per year.
Right.
However, like you said, Paul, if you're just getting started, and let's say you put the full $6,000 in, that doesn't really give you a lot to work with to do self-directed investment. The other thing to think about is you're going to have to pay some custodial fees or transactional fees to do this. So depending on the amount you're moving in, does it financially make sense with a very small balance like that, does it financially make sense to have a self-directed IRA? And the answer might be not yet. So maybe the answer is you put your funds in a Fidelity account, like you said, with the option to start growing it in the market.
Yeah.
And then when you get to a point where you have built up those funds enough to where you can do something with them that you want to do, then that time would probably be right to move them over. And I would say that sometimes people are under the misconception, though, that because of there's so much talk about this, buy real estate with your IRA, and that's great. But it doesn't mean that you have to have, 5 or 6 figures in your IRA to purchase a property, because like you said, Paul, there are other options like private REITs, private equity lending. So those might require a much smaller minimum investment, where maybe $10,000 or $20,000 is actually something that you can work with. And then that just becomes a personal decision as to how cost effective, is it?
Yeah.
So
no. And then also I guess, on a side note, I want to emphasize the effect of, compounding and putting investments in. I just, a long time ago, about probably 10 years ago, I probably put into this IRA, and I didn't even look at it until now, 10 years later, and I think I had $2,000. And I opened up the envelope and I said, oh, wow, it's 10,000. So like without even just, I just put it away and I just didn't even think about it. And then I got a letter and I just saw the amount that was in there. It was like 10,000. I was like, wow. So, understanding that, the long-term effect of investment, it's huge, and people don't really realize that.
Yeah. Agreed.
Another question
to that. Do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
For understanding that we probably have some real estate investors that might be self-employed or agents that might be on a 1099 basis.
Hmm.
I just wanted to mention again the SEP IRA
Yeah.
because while you are limited as far as how much you can contribute to like a traditional or Roth, with the SEP you have limits as well, but the limits are calculated differently, and that's to try to accommodate people that own their own businesses. Because if you own your own business, you might be making really good money, but you don't have a 401k from somewhere, right, that's sponsoring a plan for you, or maybe you just never really started a retirement account. And a lot of people that are self-employed seem to think like that they don't have that option, but that's not true, because with accounts like a SEP, for example, they allow you to take up to 25% of your earnings and you can put them into the retirement plan. So I think
Oh,
it
wait,
maxes out
25, did you say 25%?
yeah, 25% of your earnings.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And that maxes out at 56,000 per year. You have to pick the smaller of the two. Whatever's smaller, 56,000 per year, or whatever your 25% of your earnings is calculated to be.
I didn't realize that. Wow, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
a lot of people don't realize that. I think it's just because traditional and Roths are so common and there's just not a lot of education on it.
Right.
And I feel really strongly about this because business owners work really, really hard.
No, yeah, believe me. I mean, yeah, you put in 24 hours, like, yeah.
Yeah, and they should be entitled to the same tax benefits and the ability to save for retirement without having to pay taxes on all that, especially if maybe you want to take a percentage of what you're making and put it away into an account. So the SEP is an idea. I can't necessarily say that it's best for everyone. I'm not an advisor or a tax advisor.
Right.
But from an educational standpoint, I can tell you, the features of a SEP allow more accommodation for business owners. So something to think about as you were talking about all that.
No, that's very helpful. Another question I had was, so let's say somebody had 300,000, right?
Okay.
And let's just say that he wanted to put 100,000 into an investment. Now what happens to the other 200? Is it just sitting there and doing nothing, or does he have options, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is assuming you take let's say that you take all the 300,000 you had somewhere else and you move it all into the self-directed IRA.
Right.
Just decide you're only going to use 100,000 for a specific investment. So now you have 200,000 in cash, essentially, that's sitting in your account. So because everything that we hold is completely self-directed, if you don't direct us to do something with it, it will sit there.
Right,
so
gotcha. Okay.
That's where we do have some different options. I mean, I would say from a self-directed standpoint, the option is you could do a second investment or a third investment with the remaining cash. One thing that we offer for convenience is a sub-account through a relationship with TD Ameritrade. And basically what the sub-account is just an option for you to have like a brokerage account underneath your self-directed IRA. So if you wanted to use that cash at some point, but maybe not for 6 months, but you don't want it to just sit there, you have the option to put it into the TD Ameritrade sub-account where you can then buy TD Ameritrade's products like stocks, bonds, or you can put it in a money market just if you wanted to earn something. And then it gives you the ability to much more conveniently move the cash back and forth between your sub-account and your next generation account, because it's being held underneath that rather than having it at an outside institution where then you have to try to transfer it in and out all the time. That's usually more paperwork and it takes longer. So that's an option for people that think that might be something that they need. But I would also say for real estate investors, it's important to make sure that if you're gonna have a rental property, for example, you want to have more in the account than you need just for a purchase, right? Because you're going to want to have reserves in there for maintenance, repairs, expenses, that sort of thing. So keep that in mind. But of course, if you had a surplus like 200,000, you understandably, like you said, you wouldn't want it just sitting doing nothing. So there are some different options that you have. Or you could decide to move less into the self-directed account if you don't need the other portion right away, and you can keep the other portion where you had it. If you had it in like a Fidelity or a Schwab IRA and keep it in the market, and then when you're ready to use it, you could transfer it in. You can do as many transfers as you want, so you're not limited to that.
Cool. Okay. So I'm pretty much running out of questions, but I do, and I'm, I don't know if I asked the right questions or good questions, but
yeah, you did. There's so much. We could literally sit here all day and talk about the nuances of this. I think like it's good to have like a high level kind of educational discussion like we're doing now, so people
Right.
understand like the concept and the benefits.
Right,
And then
right.
there's a whole slew of more information that we can provide or that's on the website as far as like specific investment types or specific, other questions as well. It's definitely not like learning everything in one day.
No, it's not. I mean, I'm learning some new things right now, but
Right.
one last question before we get into what I was telling before. As a real estate agent, and I think I saw this on the website, what additional benefit as a real estate agent can they benefit from knowing this? I guess,
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of agents might not think there's a benefit if they decide like I don't want a self-directed IRA for myself. This isn't for me. Why do I need to understand this? I think the benefit there could come in from like a networking perspective and a credibility perspective, because if you're working with somebody that's using an IRA to buy property, they're going to want to work with agents that understand how IRAs purchase properties. It's a little bit different, right? So there are agents that understand this space very well, and they're able to seek out those or build relationships with those types of investors. And keep in mind, a lot of these self-directed IRA investors have a lot of money. Not all of them, but there are, when you look at like Mitt Romney, who had a self-directed IRA, he had like millions and millions of dollars in a Roth and did these private equity deals, and that's how he built up his. So there are a lot of high net worth, sophisticated investors that are using self-directed IRAs. So as an agent, if you want exposure to that clientele by understanding this kind of component, that can give you an edge over somebody else that doesn't. Right. And expand your network, obviously, by being able to work with those types of investors, because it's a whole new channel to explore.
I think so too. I mean, I think it's relatively, I'm gonna say relatively, but I think once you have a niche and you start developing it, I think there's a way to make money, build upon that, I guess, relationship.
Right.
Yeah. So before we end, I thought I would do something a little bit different starting this time, and I wanted to give to get to know Brittany a little bit better, because I've known her and I've seen her on Facebook, but I don't really know her. So I was gonna do a social minute, meaning I'm gonna give a bunch of questions, and you just whatever answers you can come up with, just say it right there. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, first one, favorite social platform, Facebook or Instagram?
Instagram.
Favorite TV/Netflix series?
Oh my gosh, that's such a tough one. I'm into so many different things. Right now, I'm watching Power because it's on every Sunday.
Okay.
And I love Power. Yeah, I'd have to say that's the one I'm like most into right now, without getting into too much detail.
All right, sounds good. Power. Okay, I haven't seen it, but I may look into it afterwards.
It's directed by 50 Cent, so you'll find it easily.
All right, favorite movie?
The Shawshank Redemption, number one.
Oh, nice movie. I like that. All right, coffee, tea, or water?
Coffee.
Coffee. All right, Starbucks?
Yeah, I like my Starbucks. Okay. Yeah.
All right, iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
iPhone. Okay, I have iPhone too. Which application do you use every day?
At work? Is that
work? At work.
Salesforce.
I'm sorry?
Salesforce for sure. I'm in Salesforce all day at work.
Okay, Salesforce. That's because you're in marketing.
Yes.
Which iPhone applications do you use every day?
Let's see, definitely my social platforms. The Gmail app, check my mail. Probably the weather app too. And I have the Newsbreak app too, so I get like news articles and updates on there. I would say those are probably the ones I look at every day consistently.
Besides Instagram, right?
Yeah, besides my Instagram, for sure. But I also use Facebook and LinkedIn too.
Gotcha. Well, that was it. I mean, that's I want, I just randomly just pick some questions up so that we can kind of get to know you better. But I mean, I'm gonna expand on those questions as I do these series more on a weekly basis. But I hope that whoever watched this video, this live, and afterwards, what's the best way to get in touch with you? And if people want to get more information, I know that your website, I checked it out. There's a lot of good information online.
Yeah.
Um, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I would definitely say check out the website. Like you said, we actually just launched that website. We completely redesigned it.
Hmm.
So that was very exciting, like a month or two ago. That's nextgenerationtrust.com. So you can download live webinars or webinars on demand through there. You can subscribe to a newsletter. We have white papers you can download on different topics. And then I would also say we have a live chat feature on the website. If you don't necessarily want to call in, but you just want to live chat with one of our reps, you can do it there, and then we can connect you with somebody. I would also say if you want to speak with somebody live, you can call us at the office. Our contact information on the site too. We do have a customer service model here that is very accessible, so we always have a live person answer the phones, and we always pick up by the third ring. That is our
Awesome.
standard.
Awesome.
So you will definitely not have a problem getting in touch. You can ask for me by name. If I'm not available, then certainly somebody on my team can speak with you if you want to have further discussion about your particular circumstances or additional questions that might pop up after this. And we're on all social as well if you want to follow us for updates.
All right, sounds good. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to answer questions, get on live, and just look up Next Generation and get in touch with them. If you have any questions, I checked out your website and it has tons of information. The webinars I think is good. So I want to thank you again. Last
Thank
minute. All right.